Hi, I'm Corey. Welcome to Creating with Scraps. This is the first video in the One Sheet Wonder series, and I've got a couple other One Sheet Wonder videos, but this is the first one that I had shared with you where we're going to be making a variety of these One Sheet Wonders, 1820, that measure 5.5 by roughly 4 inches. And I put them in this journal. We're not making, not a journal, this book. We're not making the book, we're just making the One Sheet Wonders to do with as you choose. But for the sake of ease in storing them, I put them inside this book. It's just a chipboard book covered with the Tim Holtz backdrops. And Tim has Tim Holtz Altered Charms is the closure. Here is the first one. All of these are done with the Tim Holtz paper. So if you've seen the previous videos that show where I briefly showed them, you'll notice that. But I tried to also do a sample in a different 12 by 12 paper so you can see that it doesn't have to be done with vintage paper and it can be done with most any non-directional 12 by 12 cardstock. All right, first one has a belly closure, a belly band style closure, or I guess a belt style closure, and then a left flap, right flap, center flap, and then center. And here it's got a pocket on your first main flap. It's got a belly band on the back side of that flap. It's got a center pocket and it's got a tuck spot. So plenty of places to put things. And for the sake of ease, I did them all, the samples, I left them unglued and in cardstock so you can see, because sometimes I think that helps. And then I wrote written directions so I don't do something silly and foolish. And then the whole book will be done this same way. I'll go to the next one and share that sample with you. But here I want to see it decorated. I mean, I'm not making the decorations. The one sheet makes the base of the book, not the decorations. I'd gotten some packets of a couple pieces of pattern cardstock with some embellishments at a yard sale, a bunch of those, and I thought this would be a fun way to use them. So here it is decorated. And I've got my left flap, right flap, my closure, and I've just put a little notepad there. Open this up. I've got on the right side, I've got a little notebook with a pull-out journaling spot. And again, these are from the scraps that I got within that kit. And then a side for, it was recipe themed, obviously, so I just used some vintage recipes and such and put them in here for the decoration. And then the center one, I just tucked a pocket on the bottom with some tag and journaling card, and then there is a side pocket on the side for some recipes, and then you open it up, and the belly band on the left, again, a place for some more recipes. The back has a deep pocket, and I just, maybe I can put some vintage recipes in there, and this fits the standard cards. It doesn't fit the large index cards, but it fits the standard index cards. And then in this pocket, I added a little notebook for some more recipes. And down here, this pocket, I made it into a little tuck, and then it's a fold down journaling note, whatever place. So it makes a great gift. You can put it inside your journals. You'll see in the one I showed you, I used this section right here to sew it into my journal. So you can put one of these inside a journal as well. You can make this Happy Mail. You can use it however you choose. But this is what we're making decorated. Okay, just to give you some options. I also, in addition to the directions, I created one using just solid cardstock because I think sometimes it's easier for you to see where I'm cutting when you're not fighting with the pattern. And again, this is a super basic one, super inexpensive craft cardstock. And I did not glue this one because sometimes I think it's easier to see what it looks like unglued. You can get a better visual of what you're going to be making. And so that's what this looks like, and we can refer to it as needed. Now I did decorate it a little bit because the pattern paper acts as a break between these sections, whereas cardstock, it's all solid. So I put a little bit of washi, but you know, doesn't change the flow of it. And that's what this looks like. And then when we're all said and done, this will be glued, and this will be glued to make your pockets, and then it folds like this. Okay, and I'll show you how to make that. All right, first thing I do is I am using 12 by 12 cardstock. Cardstock is a better idea than regular paper simply because you need the stability of cardstock, and it doesn't matter so much what your weight is on this. I prefer non-directional cardstock, but use what you've got. This is a great way to use up some of your pieces. I am going to cut my 12 by 12 piece of paper to 12 by 11. So basically I'm cutting a 1-inch strip off of one side. Now, if you're using directional paper, you are going to want to cut that 1 inch off the top or the bottom because of the way we're folding it. I don't recommend directional paper, but just keep that in mind because the 11 inches is going to be what makes our height, the 5 1/4. And then I know I need to cut this in half, so I might as well just cut it right now. This remaining 12 by 1 strip, I know I need to cut it in half, so I'll just cut it in half. All right, my next step, I've got my 12 by 11 piece. I am going to put the 12-inch side across my scoreboard, and if you don't have a scoreboard, that's absolutely fine. Just use what you've got. I'm going to score it at 4 inches. I'm going to score it at 8 inches. Again, I've got the 12-inch side going across. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees and score at 5 1/2. That's my in half mark. All right. Now, I am going to add a score line at the 8-inch. You need a little bit of room on your right side closure just for the wrap and however much bulk you want to put in. So if you like thinner things, maybe you want an 8-inch give. If you like a little bit thicker things, maybe a 1/4 inch. So you want it somewhere between 1/4 and an inch, and 1/4 of an inch and an 1/8 of an inch. And it really doesn't matter what you choose. Choose the measurement that works best for you. But now I'm not going to score it all the way to the bottom. I'm going to score it from the top just to my center 5 1/2 inch line. I'm working on my far right 4 by 5 1/2 panel, and I am going to score right next to my 8-inch score line. I just want a little bit of space there. So I'll come down and show you. See, I didn't score it all the way to the bottom. I just scored to the edge, right? Or to the 5 1/2 inch mark. And it looks like that, just to give me a little bit of room while I'm closing. You don't want to score to the inside of the 8. You want to score to the outside of the 8. That's important when you're wrapping it closed after we make the cuts. So keep that in mind. Your left panel should be 4 inches, your central panel should be 4 inches, and now your far right panel is just slightly less than 4 inches. I don't think we need to score anything else. All right, next step is to cut. Scissors, trimmer, whatever you want to use. I've got my page oriented with 4-inch panel, top and bottom, 4-inch panel, top and bottom, and slightly less than 4 inch on the top and 4 inch on the bottom. So the one with the extra score line is my top. I am going to cut at the 4 inch, so starting on my left, I'm going to cut the 4-inch mark to the center score line. So from the bottom, I'm cutting at 4 inches to 5 1/2 inches. Now I cut just to the left and just to the right of the score line so that my folds go evenly. And it's maybe a 1/16 of an inch. It's just a sliver. Just because I feel like it folds, the paper folds a little better that way. So I've got 2 little marks, and you can see I just have a little itty bitty sliver there. It's not even 1/8 of an inch. So it looks like this. Then I'm going to move it over, and at the 8-inch mark, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut just to the left of the 8-inch mark. I mean, just to the left, the 8-inch score mark. And I'm going to cut it up to my center at 5 1/2. So again, I'm cutting from the bottom. And now, instead of cutting a sliver like we did over here, I'm going to cut the rest of this far right bottom panel off. So if you're looking at it, you're taking off the far right bottom piece. Sorry for that glare line. There's just not much I can do about it with the overhead light. And I'm cutting from the bottom to my cut line. So at the 5 1/2, there. So I just took off that bottom section. And this is what it should look like at this point. left, center, right, and right has a little bit of a score line. Bottom left, bottom center, and we haven't cut that flap. Now you can tear it off, but I usually cut it to give it a straight line after I'm done folding. Okay. I'm going to fold these two bottom sections to the back. Okay, they're going to go behind the panel that I'm working on. And I just use my score line, press it down straight. Can you see there? Sorry. Score line. I just wanted to be able to see what I was doing. Press it down straight. Okay, and now you can see I didn't cut up high enough here, so I'm going to trim that, and I'm going to trim this off because I don't want this section longer than the other two. I want it to be flush with this. And I could use my trimmer, but I'm just going to cheat and go like this. Hopefully I'm cutting it straight. I'm kind of far away from it, and well, there you go. Close enough. Okay. These I will discard. And this is what it looks like at this point. Okay, these folds are to the back, the two flaps are in the back, and then my left panel, center panel, right panel. All right, now the next step I'm going to do is I've got this 4 by 5.5 piece. I want to cut this at 2.5 inches on the 4-inch side. So I want to keep my 5.5 inch length, and I'm going to cut this to 2.5 inches. Okay, and I'm going to use these pieces, this 1.5 inch piece and this 2.5 inch piece later. Okay, and now because I started with pattern paper, this 4-inch panel, the far right top 4-inch panel, I'm going to cut this down to 2.5 inches, and I'm going to cut it to 2.5 inches from my inside score line. Now you have wiggle room here. You can cut it at 2 1/4 or 2 3/4, just depending on what pattern you've got. Like on my first one, I cut it at 2 and between 1/4, so some maybe to like 2 3/8 because of where the pattern line was. But you want it to be about 2.5 inches. And so I'm going to cut this at 2.5 inches. So my far right panel will be just about 1.5 inches. And again, you can go a little ways either way. But you don't really want to cut it smaller than 2 1/4. And the reason for that is this is going to be your right side closure, and you want to make sure that you've got overlap with your top closure. So you don't really want it smaller than that. And if you cut it too small, you'll see the line, and you don't want to see that. What I mean by that is you've got to have a little bit of overlap here. So if you cut it smaller than 2.5, you're going to see this cut line. See? So 2.5. All right. Now I've got these 4 pieces put to the side. I'm going to be using those. And this is what my piece looks like at this point. The next thing I'm going to do is take a couple divots, and you can make divots however you choose. This is just my method. I'm going to make a divot on this back flap on the far left side, because when I close this is going to be the piece that shows. The belly band is going to go here, which is why I don't want to make the divot on the inside, right? I want to make my divot on the back far left. And so to do that, I'm just moving it to the side, and I like to make it about in the center, but if you're an eyeballer, absolutely eyeball. I am not a good eyeballer. So I'm going to make a little mark about halfway, and then I'm using a 2-inch circle punch. If you have a 1-inch circle punch, great. If you have a 1.5, use what you've got. I'm going to take my divot based on that where I made that center mark, about like that. And then I save this piece, and I'll show you how I use it. Again, certainly not something you need to do, but it works for me. So I've got my divot from my back flap on the far left, and now I want to take a divot in this center. So I'm going to turn it around just so I can see what I'm working with. But center top, front center top. You don't want to take a divot in this piece because this is the back of your folio. So I'm going to take a divot right here. I'm going to turn it around, find my center, and that's a 4-inch piece. So I'm going to mark it at 2 inches. And then this is just kind of how I take divots. I don't always cut them the same, so I'll use the piece that I've already cut off as a guide. Put a little bit of glue on the back of it, doesn't need to be much. And then I use the center line and the center line, and I match them up. I match up the edges and the center lines. so that my cuts, they're not right next to each other, but this way I know they're about the same. The depth is about the same. I lay it down and I use that as my guide to cut my center divot. Okay. And then I'll put this aside because I'm going to take one more divot in just a little bit. All right. And this is what it looks like. I've got a divot in my center. I've got a divot in my side, and I'm ready to go. My next step, I'll put this aside. The piece that is 2.5 by 5.5 is going to be my left-sided closure flap. So I need to score this at 1/2 inch. Now, can you score it at 1/4? Sure. Can you score it at 3/8? Sure. But the reason I score at 1/2 inch is this is the closure that's holding the whole book closed, and I want to make sure I've got sufficient glue and a sufficient strength to be the base or the hinge of this folio, which is why I like 1/2. So I'm going to score it at 1/2 inch and fold that down. And so this section is 2 inches and my hinge is 1/2 inch. I am going to pull my little folio in front of me, and I want to glue this on this far left piece of paper, okay? Because when I close this up, it's going to close. This left flap goes in here, the right flap is part of the top, and this piece is the rest of the top. So where I want to glue this is right here. Now you can see I've got two choices. This is my back right flap, okay? The top and the bottom, both pieces. So if I'm looking at it like this, this is what it looks like, right? Folds to the back. If I glue my piece right here, then I've got to glue again right here, okay? If I glue this hinge to the back top piece, when I fold it closed, it encloses this edge, okay? See what I mean? The difference here, if I glue it here versus if I glue it here. So I like to glue it to this back. So it is the back right edge of the top left piece. So I'm gluing it right here. That's just my personal preference. You can glue it in any of those spaces and it'll work just fine. That's just where I like to glue it. And I'm gluing the back of this right down to here because it's going to wrap around, and I'll show you. Glue. And then I'll put that, I want the hinge or the score line right kind of at the edge, and just for the sake of seeing that, I will line it up here to make sure it's mostly straight, because when I'm working with small pieces, sometimes it's easy to not make it straight. And then I start at the bottom to make sure that it's where I want it, and I don't want it, and then I match it up to the top, okay? And line it up and glue it down. Now it's hard to see because solid and solid, but I just glued this back piece, okay? You can see there. So when it's open, it looks like this, okay? So I've got left, center, right, bottom, left, bottom, center, no bottom, right. I'm going to flip this back, and this is where my little closure is. I lift this piece up because it's going to wrap around, and then I lift this piece up, and that's what it looks like from here. Okay, so then when I close this, close this, close this, that's how I get my closure. All right, next section. I've got my book opened up. I've got these two pieces and these two pieces. So the two 1x6 and then the two 1.5 by 5.5. I'm going to use one of these 1x6 pieces right here to make my belly band. Now, you can just cut it flush to the length, but if I want my belly band to go top to bottom, what I'll do, I've got an extra 1/2 inch, right? Because this was 6 inches. So I'll score it 1/4 and 1/4 and then fold it over. And that's optional. You can just glue it straight down, but I'm going to use my scoreboard and score at top and bottom. So I'm scoring at 5 3/4 and 1/4. Again, if you choose to just cut it off at 5 1/2, you can do that too. So you can see I've got those two little score marks, and then I'm going to fold those down, and then I'm going to glue those little flaps that I created, just those, here to make my belly band, so that gives me a full width. It works either way. So gluing these down, I'm going to put glue on the first scored fold and the second scored fold at the top and the bottom. I'm going to center this. Remember, this is 4 inches wide, just so I can make sure I put it mostly straight. And I'm going to glue that down. Left, I'm working at the top left flap. I just glued down my belly band. Okay, and you can see there, that's my belly band. Now, I am going to glue one of the remaining 1 inch piece right here at the edge. And the reason we cut this off initially is because, well, why didn't you just leave it there? Because when you're folding this up and you're creating this inside pocket, I really like the contrast of the pattern papers. I've used the 2 pattern papers. So this is the back side of that extension, and this is the front side of that extension. It just gives you a contrasting look. When you're working on with solid paper, you don't notice the difference as much, but it just kind of gives it a cool effect, which is why I did that. So the 1 by 6 piece, you're going to trim it down, obviously, because it's going to be a little bit longer. And I'm going to put glue at the edge, but I just trim that off at the end. Glue at just the edge. Again, I use my straight edge to make sure it's mostly straight. And I glue this down. No, I can't believe I did that. Take that off. Don't do that. If you haven't done that yet, don't do that. That was bad. My bad. My bad. You need this for your closure on the front. You don't want, this is your closure on the front. I guess you could use one of these others. It's not that big of a deal. But this 1 by 6, put it aside. Don't use that. Use one of their 2 1.5 by 5.5 pieces. Okay? It's already trimmed for you, and it gives you the 1 inch strip to use for your closure band. Sorry about that. That is why I should be reading my directions, because it's been a little while since I wrote them and made this. So I'm going to glue this down. Just made a little bit of an extension. It gives me more of an overlap, and it creates, and it doesn't matter if you glue that on the top or the bottom. That's completely up to you. This would normally be inked, and it would be contrasting papers, and so you've got a nice visual when it's closed. They overlap, right? It creates that overlap that you want, and you don't see this seam. All right, here is my last section on the inside. This is where I'm going to take my last divot. This is a 5.5 inch piece, so I am going to make a mark in the center. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the back of the divots that I've already cut. Put them down. Give it a second to adhere. And then that's my depth finder, my center and my depth finder. Just line it up with my circle punch. I just kind of pull it to the edge, right? And then that way my depth's the same on all of them. And at this point, I just toss them. All right, now I'm going to put glue on the top, the right side, and the bottom. My divot is going to be opening to the left. And I line that up. Again, these would be contrasting papers if I were using pattern paper, but I'm going to line it up right here to create a narrow, thin side tuck. So I'm going to glue top, side, straight side, and bottom. And I glue it down just over. I glue it down just over the seam that I created. Make sure it's mostly straight. All right, now you've got your right side tuck, your center pocket, your belly band. When you open this up, you've got your large side pocket, and then you've got your right closure flap and your left closure flap. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do, we've got this 1x6. I cut it at about 3 inches, cut it in half. Notice I haven't glued any of those back flaps down yet. And I'll grab my sample and show you. This is what it'll look like at this point. Okay, so here's the inside. Here's your flap. And this is what it'll look like from the inside before you've glued anything down. So don't glue the backs quite yet. Okay. Put your strap on, your closure strap, your belt, I guess is a better way to put it. And the way I do that is, I know I haven't scored this or bone folded this yet, but there you go. So here is my left side closure, and then once I open it up, my right side closure. I start with my left, and just turn it sideways, right? I've got it folded the way it's going to be when it's done, and I turn it sideways. And I'll take this 1x3 and put glue along the bottom. And I use a decent amount of glue simply because it's going to hold this thing closed. And then when I've got it lined up on my my workspace, I just center it and put it right, make sure it's straight, make sure it's mostly centered, and then I put this strap down just like that. And I'm gluing it. I'll show you where I'm gluing it. I am not, oh, see, I'm a dork. Don't do what I just did. I thought I had that folded down. This is the back of my folder, right? My back flap. I want this to go underneath this. I thought I had it tucked underneath, and I didn't. Okay, so do as I say, not as I do. I want that piece to go right here. Okay, this glued section, I want it to go right here. And that's going to hold the whole thing closed for me. So let's try that again. I'm so glad this is just a sample. Okay, trying that again. I thought I had it tucked under there, but I did not. All right, center, back. You can see I want it to go right here because I'm going to wrap it around to hold the whole thing closed. Mostly straight, mostly centered. Hold it down. It's glued on the inside of my back center flap. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Maybe I should have just, you know what, for the sake of these, I probably should have just opened this up and just worked on the back center flap. That might make a whole lot more sense. I didn't do it that way, but I probably should have done it that way. Learn from my mistakes. Take the second one, glue on just that second piece. I'm going to line this up to make sure that it's straight. Okay, straight at the top, straight here, well, mostly straight. And then I'm going to put down the other side. Okay, maybe that makes a little more sense. Yeah, I should have thought of that. So I didn't have, if I had a full strip, then I could have put the full strip across, but I didn't have a full strip. So I wanted to use what I've got. And again, my leftover bits are essentially this. So I've glued that down on both sides. This is the back piece. Now I can glue down this back. So now I'm going to glue the far right and the far left because I want it to be open at the top. Of course, if you're an inker, you want to ink before you glue. You can ink after, but it's just easier to ink before. Okay. And now I glue that down. So that's the back centerpiece. Down the back center. Yeah, you can see there, but this is just a sample, so just don't do what I did. Make sure you tuck it in. Okay, now the last piece that we're gluing is this inside flap. You want to glue this on two sides because it's a pocket, right? So you're going to want to glue on the divot will be on your right. You're going to want to glue on the left and what will be the bottom, right? Because of the way you're doing this. So you're going to want to glue the left and the bottom. so I'm going to put a little extra glue. Okay. And glue that up. Press it down. And here you go. As my Aussie friends would say, and Bob's your uncle. And then this folds over to the right, this folds over to the left, and that is where you're going to put your Velcro closure, just here. You can use a magnetic closure if you want to, or you can use a button, or, you can do what you choose. I just used a Velcro closure. So left, right, center. And there you go, decorate it as you please. Thank you very much for watching. That's it for the One Sheet Wonder. Hopefully the next one won't be quite this long. But there were a couple things I wanted to touch on. Thank you for the Happy Meal. Somebody anonymous sent me this really pretty, it's that cross-stitch paper, that heavier cross-stitch paper, but in this burgundy cranberry color. Absolutely beautiful, great for Christmas stuff. And I haven't seen this paper before. It is actual paper, but it's kind of got a satin finish on it. So thank you very much for that. And also I wanted to show you Katie Schoeneman, and I apologize if I'm not saying that right. Katie Schoeneman from Craft Baked Journals. Just recently restarted her channel, and she shared on Tracy's channel, the Foxy Crafters, these fun little cards that she made. And I asked her if she would sell me some or if she wanted to do a swap or something. And I just thought they were really pretty and a little bit different. She used watercolors and flower images to create these little samples with a brad. They're really, really cute. I will try to link her video below. I'll have to come back and add it after this posts. But you know, if you're interested in trying something like this, go check it out. When I saw it, I had a play, and I did it slightly different than she did, simply because I do. And I put ink on some card and then punched those in shapes, and made the same idea with a journaling card. You can do circles, squares, whatever. But I mean, you can take her great concept and change it to make it work well for you. I didn't use a brad. I just kind of sewed it on to these journal card bookmarks. And just changed it up a little bit, and it was a lot of fun. So give that a try, just to add fun, interest, and change into your journals. And do check out Katie's channel. I'm kind of a dork, and I was thinking this Wednesday is the Wednesday that I selected winners from the draw. It was supposed to be last Wednesday, and I just realized that. So I'm going to do that today, and I'll contact all the people that won. I'm not going to do all that on camera. I'll just count down a number and then let those people know. Thank you very much for watching. My goal again is to have these up once a week, maybe on Saturdays, but maybe not. School starts back tomorrow, so my time won't be my own for quite some time. All right, here, let me put this back out here so you can see what it is we made. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Take care. Oh, Etsy, I knew I had another thing. I have been putting items in the Etsy shop and not announcing it beforehand. So if you're interested in something, when I've got something available, I'm just going to put it in. And there you go. All right. Thank you all very much for watching. Take care and happy creating.